Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to wait just a few more minutes. I really don't like to start late, but we only have 3 of our committee members here, so I'm going to give them about another 5 minutes and then we'll get started. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll go ahead and get started. We've got several of our committee here, and we've got a lot of business to take care of, so I'm going to call this meeting to order. Thanks. Pull that door closed. All right, this is the first meeting on the fiscal 2019 budget of the Subcommittee on Higher Education. So we do have a copy of the 18 recommendations from the Senate that I think, Patrick, you passed that out to everybody. I haven't had a chance to really go into any of their changes yet, so we'll save that for the next meeting we have. They didn't make a lot. They made a few. I think we're going to have some more conversations on what they did with the rural development cut that they made and some other things. I've got to spend some time with the chairman. He's got a toothache, so I don't want to tell him they were cutting his rural development initiative. While he's got a toothache, I have more self-preservation instincts than that. So we'll get to that. You do have a copy, so you can go through and see what changes the Senate has recommended to the conference committee. So we've got several opportunities today to hear from different departments and under our responsibility, and we have 4 presentations. We have the University System of Georgia, we have the Technical College System, Georgia Military College, and University of Georgia B budgets. We haven't spent much time in the B budget, and I wanted to have this committee take some time to listen to some of these requests out of the B budget. But the first is going to be Regents, and rather than just a recitation of our budget, and everything is on the table, members of the committee, to talk about, but one of the things that I wanted this committee to have an opportunity to do is talk about some of the really good news that's happening out of our Board of Regents. And if we hear anything from the parents and the constituents that we have, it's the cost of university education. I mean, we see each year where we stand, and fortunately we stand very well in comparison to our neighbors in the southeastern region on the overall cost of tuition and fees. But it is what we do hear about. And there's some things that we've been able to affect with the Hope Scholarship, but those of you who have paid that, like with the 6 children that my wife and I have, it's about a fifth, even with Zelle. So it's not necessarily a panacea when you're in Hope. And I do know one thing, and I do know what textbooks cost. When you pay $750 to $1,000 a semester for textbooks, that's almost a tuition payment. At least it's about half of what the Zelle was picking up at some of the colleges and universities my children attended. So if we want to make a dent and want to become heroes to our constituents on college education costs, let's take a look today at textbook cost. I mean, we have the example that's been in this committee for years about Georgia Public Broadcasting and what they were able to accomplish with the 8th grade social studies text. Currently saving the state about $9 million a year. It's an amazing savings. It's probably one of the better, more in-depth resources for our students to be able to learn with that the state has. And I've been talking to the Regents system over the last few years about this, and they've put a great deal of time and effort into what I think we're going to find today is an amazing program that's going to save our taxpayers, our families, a lot of money. I haven't seen this yet, so I'm excited to hear about it. So, Shelley, who is going to give the presentation? You want to come up and introduce your team? So, with that as a introduction, I'm really looking forward to this. This is good news, ladies and gentlemen. This is one of those where we want to find out what's happening that this Board of Regents and their Regent staff has put together. And I'm hoping that we can continue this in a spectacular fashion in the years moving forward and really save some money. So, Ms. Nickel.
It's a pleasure to be here today to give you some really good news. Today we have Lucy Harrison, who is our director of our libraries throughout the system. She comes to us from the state of Florida and has been here 2 years now? About a year and a half. And she has done a remarkable job already. So with that, I just introduce Lucy.
Thank you, Chairman Earhart, members of the committee. It's my pleasure to be here today. Thank you. Shelley just introduced me, so I won't do it again. I will note that I also oversee the Galileo Virtual Library of Georgia, which serves not only the university libraries, but the public, technical college, K-12, and private libraries in the state. So this, in a nutshell, is the problem that Affordable Learning Georgia was created to solve. This is a chart showing the incredibly steep rise of textbook costs since the 1970s. Costs are rising at about 3 times the normal rate of inflation. What that means in today's dollars, these are national numbers. These may be a little higher, a little lower, depending on where you are. But textbooks and other course materials are averaging around $1,250 per year. So over the course of a 4 or sometimes longer college career, that can be $5,000 or more that students are paying. What does that mean? That impacts students. There was a survey done by the Florida Virtual Campus back in 2016. They surveyed 22,000 students. Almost 2/3 of them indicated that at some point they had chosen not to purchase a required textbook because of the high cost of those textbooks. Almost half decided to take fewer courses, and over a quarter dropped a course after registration because of the textbook costs. Obviously, this is not good news. If you don't have a textbook, you're not going to do as well in the class. If you're taking fewer courses, it's going to take you longer to get through your college career. So back in 2011, the Board of Regents took a proactive approach to this, and one of the strategies that they identified back then was looking at open textbooks or open educational materials. So let me just pause there and explain what we mean by open educational resources. The bottom line is these are free to students, to anybody actually. They are openly licensed either in the public domain or through a license called Creative Commons that allows for revising, remixing, editing, downloading, whatever you would like to do with them, you're free to do. They are electronic, so they're available on the web or via your handheld device or your laptop, but they're also in a format that can be easily printable if somebody wants to go ahead and print out the full thing and have that paper copy. And anybody can use these. So while we are a university system initiative, the materials that are created through our program are available to anybody, including the technical college system, K-12, whomever would like to use them, private academics. So the core strategies that Affordable Learning Georgia is employing, we are working with faculty at the institutions at the university system to help them redesign courses to move from a commercial textbook, a publisher-provided textbook that may cost quite a bit of money, to a free or open, low-cost materials. Ideally, these would be open, fully open materials, but also there are materials through the library sometimes that are free to the student that we encourage them to take advantage of. We are building an engaged community of educators to get the word out and start being evangelists for this program. We do also partner with some other leaders around the state, and I'll mention a few of those a little bit later on. But the bottom line is that we are reducing the cost of textbooks to students and saving them money. The main mechanism that we're using for this is our Textbook Transformation Grants program. We offer 3 different size grants ranging from about $5,000 all the way up to $30,000 for the really high impact programs. And those go to the institutions, not directly to the faculty members, to give them the time and resources that they need to transform that course from one that is dependent on a commercial textbook to one that is using open educational materials. I'm happy to report that at this point, all 26 USG institutions have been awarded grants, some of them multiple grants. And there is a very robust process that we go through. There's a proposal that they have to submit. It goes through peer review. They don't get all the money at once. They get some up front and then some once they've actually implemented the materials. So I mentioned we have some statewide partners. The main one of those is the eCore program. That's the online undergraduate courses that students around Georgia can take at a lower tuition cost. We started partnering with them in our first year. We started in fiscal year 14-15, and as of this spring, eCore is now using open educational textbooks in all of their courses. So students who take eCore courses don't have to pay for textbooks. We're also partnering with Complete College Georgia and the Momentum Year that you may be hearing about, which is to encourage students to remove the barriers for them to participate, to focus in an academic area right off the bat, to take more classes, especially more relevant classes right up front. And of course, if you don't have to pay for those textbooks, you can do more of that. So the results, the bottom line, since we started, and we are in our 4th year right now, since we have started, all of our Affordable Learning Georgia programs, including eCore, have saved students over $31 million on textbook costs. We have impacted over 219,000 students, and the grant program alone that I mentioned, where we've awarded 175 grants so far, that grant program alone is expected to save $18 million a year. I will say these are fairly conservative numbers. As more of those grants roll into production and are adopted more places, then this number will increase. And as we give more grants, it will increase as well. So just to highlight a couple of success stories. Georgia State, our largest institution, This was a English Comp 1 and 2 project impacting about 5,500 students a year. They had 2 textbooks that were costing almost $200, moved to open textbooks, saving students over $1 million annually. But it's not just the largest institutions. Georgia Highlands College has been the recipient of a number of grants through us. This is an example of one. This was a biology course that they had a textbook transformation grant for. The previous book and lab manual were costing $360. So they moved again to open materials. Those 720 students don't have to pay for that any longer. And then we do have some collaborative projects too. So this is the Open Mathematics in Action project is 5 institutions collaborating together to transform their courses and create new materials. That's impacting almost 6,000 students annually and saving over almost $1.5 million a year. And I do want to point out that it's not just about the savings either. So there are some qualitative improvements as well. This is students' perceptions of those materials, of those open materials that they're using in their classes. 92% of them said that they felt very positively about it. Also, the student learning outcomes improve. So this has to do with typically course grades, but also in some cases test grades, where we see a 51% of students actually did better with an open educational text, and 41% at least did no worse than they did with a commercial textbook. So that's a 92% positive outcome in our opinion, given that they don't have to pay for the book any longer. Course retention also improves. Again, if you have the book on day 1, which is a major benefit of having these open resources, they're available from the moment, actually even before you start class. Students are more likely to stick with those classes and do well on them. So again, we see almost half did better with the open educational materials when it came to drop, fail, or withdrawal rates, and 37 at least did the same as they had with a commercial textbook. One more thing I want to mention, starting in this year, we're going to be rolling out something for all of the USG institutions. We're going to be requiring them to have a prominent notice at the point of course registration. So at the point that a student selects a class, they're going to know if that class uses either no-cost materials or very low-cost, under $40 materials. And that will help them make a decision on how to spend their money, what courses to take. We're beta testing that this summer, planning to roll out statewide in the fall of 2018. And we think that will also give us some better insight into the adoption levels and the numbers so we can get some better data. So thank you for your support of Affordable Learning Georgia over the last 4 years and for your support of Galileo for the past 20 plus years, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Ms. Harrison. Can I stand up and cheer? Members of the committee, I'm certainly interested in questions, comments. I've got a few, if you don't mind. I'm thrilled with those numbers. They're farther than I thought you were even. I knew you were having success, but that's hundreds, that's millions to our students and parents. I guess it begs the question, did you give us a cost on how much the grants cost? How much money has been spent on grants to date so that they can get this done? So
we're in our 4th year. Right now we're spending just under $1 million each year on the grants. So I would say, I'm going to look to Jeff here, about $4 million so far?
About $1 million on the grants. So.
Each year, yes. Okay,
no, that's great. That kind of begs the question, what can we do to support that? Because the ROI on this is spectacular. I mean, I assume there's a lot more metrics that are available with respect to what you did previously in the old textbook publishing world, and the amount of cost and things that you had to do to get to that point. So anything we do here, though, is truly a savings, not an extra cost to our students. So it's something we ought to think about if we can supplement grants or that type of thing. I guess secondarily, what other barriers to this are there? I've had a lot of conversations around this issue with other presidents of universities and that kind of thing. The textbook publishing industry and the long-term contracts are generally a theme that I hear. These 10-year contracts, we're locked in. How much of that is a barrier to your entry for these types of courses or these types of open source textbooks?
So I know I wouldn't say we've seen so much of the contractual locking in. There's a lot of the faculty who have sort of designed their courses around a more traditional textbook, and it is a fairly heavy lift for them to get off of that and onto something that is open. So that's why we're funding these grants, to try and help them with that initial lift process. I know that Dr. Denley is also working with some commercial textbook publishers to try and kind of attack this from the other side, because we're not going to get rid of commercial textbooks altogether. So what could we do to maybe get some statewide practices in place to get the publishers to agree to come down on prices across the board for textbooks that are being used?
Just from my own experience, I mean, are you pushing some of these professors and that kind of thing? I mean, just on the macroeconomics textbook, that Samuelson text that everybody, my dad had a copy, I had a copy, and my sons have had a copy, but the dime's worth of difference for that several $100 textbook between now and 1950, when Samuelson published it, is nothing. So, I mean, are we looking for opportunities to tell professors to move or incentivizing them?
Yes, we are. So apart from the grant program, we also have we just started a faculty learning community. So we reached out to some folks who have done a really good job of at their institution, spreading the word, getting adoption, doing departmental-wide adoptions. And we're working with that group to have them sort of become evangelists, and what are the best practices that worked at institutions, and then help spread the word across the state. We think this identifier that we're going to be putting into the course catalogs will really apply some pressure as well, right? Because it's going to make it more visible for students, but then we expect the faculty will start getting questions. Well, why isn't your course using it? What can we do to get there?
Great incentive. Well, I don't want to hog all the time. I think members have questions. Chairman Smith.
Thank you, sir.
It's turned on. I don't know. Just might have to speak up.
Okay, I'll speak up.
There you go.
Okay. I agree with the chairman that probably the biggest two complaints I get have to do with fees and the price of textbooks. And as far as the price of textbooks is concerned, free is good. The question I have is a lot of these textbooks that are used, I know back in the Stone Ages when I was in school, the professor wrote the textbook that we used. How are we dealing with funding or paying for, because you got a class that's got 100 students in it, they have to buy 100 textbooks. How does the free factor into dealing with the professor or whoever wrote these books?
So if they are developing a book through our textbook transformation grants, or adopting some other open textbook that somebody has written elsewhere, the faculty member is not profiting from that at all. There's no cost to the student. The faculty member is not going to be benefiting from that. I believe there are requirements already in place for department level approval for any textbooks that are being used, especially if the faculty member has written them themselves. So I think there are some checks and balances that need to go through. I'm not an expert on that and can't speak to the details of how that works.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
$31 million in savings, 219,343 students that have been affected. And if my math back of the envelope, if you're looking at an average of $8,000 per year in tuition across our institutions, and you're saving about $4,000 over that 4-year period, that's between 10 and 13% of the cost of their education that you've already saved just with this pilot program. Shelley's the numbers person. I'm doing that on the back of the envelope. So that's something that we should get out to. I'd love to get these copies to all of our members, not just the members of this committee. If I could get copies to, and I'll send it out under my.
Certainly, we have a handout we could provide to you that gives just a one-page handout if you'd like to send that.
This PowerPoint that I can send a letter to all of my colleagues in the House and the Senate, and to the members of the media who talk to our constituents. That's a 10% savings, and you're just getting started.
We are just getting started, yes.
It's pretty exciting stuff. Maybe this is usually pretty boring in here, but with 6 children, I get excited about a 10% savings per. So, anyone else? Well, I'm thrilled that you're not a University of Florida grad, are you?
Perhaps. But I got here as soon as
But
I
you're
could, sir.
transplant, so we're happy to have you in Georgia. Thank you very much. Thank you, Shelley. I'll make sure everybody gets copies of that. I think that's pretty amazing. That I knew it was good. I didn't know it was 10% over the life, and maybe we look for a way to help that along. If they've only, what did we hear, $1 million in grant? The grants have cost 219,000 students. That's only a fraction, obviously, of what we have. The more students we can serve, the more savings we'll get. I expect if we take a look at that and see what we can do, I'll be more than willing to entertain any suggestions from members of the committee as we walk through this process. So, thank you. All right, next on our agenda is Matt Arthur and Deputy Commissioner Martha Ann Todd, the Commissioner and the Deputy Commissioner of the Technical College System of Georgia. And I had asked Commissioner Arthur and Martha Ann to be here to talk about, as you know, we now have approximately $73 million or more pass-through dollars in our budget from the workforce development. It has been transferred, or if we pass the budgets, it is recommended by the governor's office that we transfer all of that from the Department of Economic Development to the Technical College System of Georgia. There's a significant amount of conversation that's been happening. Chairman Houston got into this locally over the last few years. I don't want to say that they thought I was meaner than Chairman Houston, but because I'm not. The accounting in this program, I want to ask this committee to take a close look at. Commissioner Arthur and Deputy Commissioner Martha Ann are just getting started with this, but I wanted you to take a look at the administrative accounting in the beginning, the accounting for each of the fiscal agents in the local areas, and I want us to look at the outcomes, because the idea about workforce development is to help people move from no job or training for a job to a job that supports themselves and their families. And I'm not convinced that we've done all we could here, to place that mildly. So they all have this copy of the administrative budget?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, well, I'm going to get you a copy of the administrative budget alone on this, and we'll please feel free to reach out and talk to Commissioner Arthur and his staff about that, because this is something that, if that's going to run through this committee, we're going to look at it with a real close lens, and this is too crucial to the people of the state who need this kind of retraining or this kind of workforce development assistance. This is a wide category. I want, as I told you earlier, I want to talk about how this can support our BRAC pushback efforts in this arena as well. So with that, again, Commissioner Arthur, I know you just got this program. There is no preconceived notion from either myself or I know not our members of the committee. So if we ask some questions, it's only because we want to know too.
Sure.
So, Commissioner Arthur.
And we are just learning. You know, we're just getting parts of the budget and some of the contracts that we're looking at, and so we understand workforce development. And I've got, do you want our current budget or?
Yeah, feel free to do whichever program you have.
Okay.
And you're ready
Okay.
to do, and then we can talk a little bit about in general terms
Sure.
about
Okay.
this workforce development.
All right. You know, well, thank you, Chairman Earhart, and members for allowing us the opportunity to speak to you about workforce development and our budget recommendations for next year. What we've seen with our business community is, of course, the need to have that steady pipeline of workforce coming to them continually. So you have to have a developmental system that feeds into them, or else they're not going to be here. They can't compete anymore just locally. It's competing across the entire globe. And so they're a lot more strategic and they're a lot more nimble than they have been in the past as far as where they're going, and their number one priority is workforce, from getting the people that are interested in going to work and teaching them the skills that they have to go to work. And that is changing. We see it quarterly with the changes that have to take place with the skills that these new workers need. So workforce development, we are Georgia's primary resource for that. We do pride ourselves in being responsive, not just large businesses, but small business in the industry and the military across the state of Georgia. When we do that, we have a unified system where we provide technical ed, we provide adult ed, and economic development with all those, for all those companies. TCSG operates Georgia's Quick Start workforce training program. It has been the number one customized training program in the country for the last 7 or 8 years, and it delivers free customized worker training. It's either on a college campus or it's on the company site, but this is companies have to meet a certain criteria to get this, but Quick Start's been around since 1967, and they've trained about 1.25 million Georgians over the years, over about 6,900 projects. And right now, of course, one of the biggest projects we have is down in Pratt Whitney in Columbus, Georgia. That they are growing, and so we are down there with Quick Start training them. We also stand by our graduates. If a company when they hire our graduates, if a student's not trained, they feel like in some of the standards that should have been taught, we take that student back. This is in every field. We have a guarantee, and we'll take them back and train them free to go back to the workforce. Each one of our colleges has an economic development team that is out there working with the industry and building relationships and tying those companies with our local colleges. Some examples: Gwinnett Tech, Mercedes-Benz, they needed service technicians. They had trouble finding them that could work on, so we set up a separate program just for Mercedes-Benz at Gwinnett Tech so that they have a pipeline of workforce coming into them. South Georgia Technical College, of course, has been working with John Deere and Caterpillar for decades. But we not only work with their corporate offices in training, we also train service technicians that work all over the South and Southeast. Savannah Technical College, of course, works with Gulfstream Aerospace to ensure that they have the certified mechanics. Georgia Northwestern in Rome, of course, that's home of the flooring industry, and so Mohawk and Shaw and all the companies up there. Right now, you'll see in our capital outlay, you'll see some FF&E money going to a building that we're currently building in that area, in the Dalton area. And we've got 10 different flooring companies that we're working on the training center for them right now as it's being built. These are some of the larger companies, but of course the thousands that we work with have anywhere from 5 to 50 to 75 employees. And we work with those companies also. The biggest challenge we have is getting the word out that we're there. And so we work on that continually. But we do have partnerships all over the state. Some of the larger ones: Shaw, Mercedes-Benz, Swift Trucking, Georgia Power, Kia, Pratt Whitney, Miller Coors in Albany, Shire, Biotech Lab, Phoebe. Those are just some of the other ones. But we served 4,755 companies last year in contract customized training. And so that's what we do. That's what we're for. That's our mission, is to train Georgia's workforce. Another way that the technical college has found to work with industry, we have more and more industries asking for apprenticeships. And so apprenticeship programs have grown 20% over the last year. In Georgia alone, we have over 7,500 apprentices. You wouldn't have, apprenticeships have been around since the beginning of time. They kind of died out. They're coming back. And we work with Yancey Brothers, Hitachi, Club Car, Textron Specialty over in Augusta, CEMEX, Frito-Lay, and hundreds of other companies are developing programs for apprenticeships. In fact, they've grown so fast, we've had to hire 2 full-time people just dealing with apprenticeships and dealing with the industry and what that entails. We are also very involved with the Georgia CAP program, where apprentices start in high school. They start, in fact, at age 15 with these industries, and that program is growing also. And it's not just the German companies that are asking for that. RF 2019 budget recommendations. You'll see the first 4 columns. You see the changes that have gone up. The majority of that money is for teacher retirement, merit assessments, teamworks, and Department of Administrative Services insurance premiums. However, under Department Administration, there's $1 million in that for marketing statewide. And under technical education, part of that $4,137,941 is a transfer of funds for the Bainbridge College campus. $1,685,416 is for that transfer for the teaching program, and the rest of that money, of course, there's some also for formula growth in our system. The final program listed is called the Governor's Office of Workforce Development. This is new to us. This is $236,601, and this is for customized recruitment. It is working with the company on exactly what they're looking for and recruiting just for that company, which will go on across the state. This works hand in hand with the workforce development grant that Chairman Earhart was talking about. This gives these workers that are wanting to go to work but not sure where to go. It takes them from their doorstep to our courses to teach them the skills they need to that industry. And this helps in that. Our capital outlay recommendations, we've got MR&R money of $25 million, and of course as our buildings age and new roofs and new HVAC systems and new windows, this money is there for that purpose. Equipment refresh is a new category for us. In the past, it's been called obsolete equipment, and it's been called world-class labs. This money makes up both those categories, and it is for replacing obsolete equipment to make sure that we have exactly what industry has, and it's also to provide for new labs to make sure we have what industry needs us to have to train the next workforce. Georgia Northwestern has $4,065,000 for FF&E. That is furniture, fixtures, and equipment on a building they're currently building that was approved last year. And then Ogeechee has $1,675,000 for FF&E. We have 2 new buildings we're recommended. One's at Coastal Pines at the Camden County campus. And of course, that's to handle the workforce that we're training from Kings Bay. And that building's $17,795,000. And then Chattahoochee Technical College, a new health science building, which is of course our largest program across the state, and it's growing at Chattahoochee for $23,525,000. West Georgia Technical College we are looking at building a building and moving that way, and there's $4 million allocated for it for property acquisition, planning, and design for a new Carroll County campus. Their campus was built in the 1950s, and it's almost to the point where we're teaching diesel mechanics out in the yard under a shade tree because the roof is just not tall enough to do it. And also we have a small cap at Chattahoochee Tech for design, construction, and equipment for a new center for advanced manufacturing and emerging technologies at $8,905,000. So we have a total of $95,270,000 in our capital outlay recommendation. And we are to talk about workforce development and the grant. We have hired Dr. Jodan Banker, who has been our executive director of technical ed, and he has worked in economic development. He has worked at the school colleges, and he has been our prime source for all of our programs for years. He is going to head this program up. and Martha and Todd will head that program up moving forward to us, that hopefully if it goes through, we'll get July 1st. But what we feel like that'll do is the state will really put a straight line from people that want a job and that need a job into the workforce. And so we are just digging into the budgets and the personnel. We've started meeting with the personnel over there and trying to get ready for that move. And we are digging into every contract that they have also to take a look at where the money has been spent and moving forward. So I'll entertain questions.
Appreciate that presentation, Commissioner. Members of the committee. Vice Chairman, let's see if I can get that right. You're 85, I think. Try that. Nope. No. Go ahead.
Commissioner, I know you mentioned how many contract hours that y'all are doing system-wide. Is there a dollar value? Did you mention that?
No, I
Associated
didn't.
with it?
No, I didn't
Okay.
mention dollar
I was
value.
just curious. You can get it to us
It's
later.
over. I'll get it to you. It's over 1.2 million hours for contract.
Commissioner, I've got a question or two. I appreciate what you're taking on, what you do, the guarantees that TCSG makes for those students, your metrics of success, over 90-something% have jobs. It's a program in this state that we should be proud of, and that year after year exceeds expectations. So we're appreciative. I know the members of the committee will look at the capital budgets or those capital outlay projects. You actually did pretty good coming out of the governor's office. There's not a lot left. As a percentage, I'd say they did probably better than most. But I'm looking forward to your analysis, Martha Ann, of the workforce development. I asked for the administrative budgets, and I'm just starting to dig into those. And in an administrative budget, we've got salaries and benefits of $3.5 million. I'm assuming that's all the staff that has been working on this, not at the regional level, but just here in Atlanta. You said you're going to dig into those contracts.
Yeah.
I'd like you to share with this committee a detailed analysis of things like that. And then you look into, there's $1 million in branding, outreach campaigns for about another $1 million. I really want to see these metrics, and I suspect members of this committee will as well. And then in the administrative category, we have all of these project funds. Like there's something called LWDA 1816, OJT. I assume that means on-the-job training projects, $775,000. But this is the administrative side. The way I read this is for administrators to administer. There's $775,000 paid to somebody to administer an on-the-job training program, and then the programmatic elements of the federal pass-through funds are. This is just the 15% of it. That's a you've got all these great Quick Start people who've been doing this. I wish we funded Quick Start at this level. I think my Vice Chair Blackman said, this is Quick Start Light. Well, Quick Start Light, it's more like Quick Start with all the money. Maybe we need to just flip that and let Quick Start and see what they could do with that. But please look into these.
We will.
The committee.
We are.
It's not making
Yes, sir.
a lot of sense. I don't want to be the only one pontificating.
We will definitely give a detailed report and
I know you
look
will.
through
I have
that.
great
And
confidence.
so,
I know Chairman Houston was talking about frustrations. I don't see that happening here, so thank you.
Yes,
I don't
sir.
see any other questions from members of the committee, so we'll wait anxiously and see what we do here over the course of the next couple of weeks. Thank you, Commissioner.
okay. Thank you.
Appreciate Thank you, Martha Ann, for coming to be there. All right. Okay. Next on our agenda is Georgia Military College. They've got a request that's in the bond section, but what I've asked General Caldwell to come up and talk about is the teachers' retirement system shortfall. Ladies and gentlemen, we've just put about $361 million in proposed budget shortfalls into the teachers' retirement system. I'm not saying we shouldn't do that. I have a concern that we're not fixing the underlying structural problems, and we've kicked this can down the road one more time, but we have an obligation on these retirement systems. And there is a unfortunate perception that the Georgia Military College is a private college. It is a public college, and it's a state institution. And they're sitting out there with a $900,000 unfunded liability, and the governor's office was able to recommend about 200 of that. I want the general to talk to you about not only what, I mentioned how unbelievable the results are from TCSG. If all of our institutions had the results in an open access institution that General Caldwell has been able to get out of and demonstrate over the last 5 years of his tenure, we'd be leading the world in success across the board. And we do, I'm proud of all of our agencies, from the Regents to the Technical College, but this one institution has an amazing track record. So I recommend to you, and again, he's in his business suit today, but this is a truly an American hero. If you ever get a chance, sit down and talk to him, and I know he's humble, he doesn't like to hear this stuff, but about where he served, what he was responsible for as a 3-star general and a true American hero. And we now have him in Georgia. General Caldwell.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you very much. Today, I just would like to set the stage again about who Georgia Military College is. I think most people know we are the military junior college of Georgia. There's only one in the state of Georgia. There's only 4 in the United States of America. And out of that program, we produce leaders for the state of Georgia. Predominantly men and women who decide they want to make a service in the armed forces will come and go spend 2 years with us, get commissioned, and move on to finish in a regent school, get their 4-year degree, and then serve honorably in uniform. Others make the decision to serve as leaders in the state. So we're very proud of that program. But in addition to that, we've got another 14,000 students who are not in the military program. And they're predominantly coming from households of less than $30,000. Over 50% of our students come from households that make less than 30%. We know we've got about 70% on Pell, almost full Pell, most of them. We know, too, that we're a predominantly minority institution, a PBI, predominantly black institution, servicing the state of Georgia. We are not a work-ready force school. That's not what we do. The tech school does that. They do an incredible job at doing that, and we would never even attempt to do what they're doing so well. Our job is to do college-ready. Our job is to take young men and women and non-traditional students who have that desire to go to a regent school, to get that 4-year degree, but can't get in. They can't make the entrance requirements. And thankfully, through the great cooperation and teamwork with the Regents system here, we're able to get a lot of those names and work with them and provide them that opportunity to come and go to school with us for 2 years, to learn how to accept responsibility, to learn work habits and study habits, and to prove that they can, in fact, master college-level courses and then matriculate into a Regent school. We did that and have for the last 5 years I've been there at about 70% of our graduates every year moving on to a Regents institution, the others to some private schools here in the state of Georgia. Others elect to go just back to work, but vast majority go into a Regent school. So that's who we are. The challenge we have, Mr. Chairman, is in the 5 years I've been there, is we've watched the percentage of TRS requirement move up from about 11% now. This summer we'll go up to almost 21%. We are not reimbursed or have an offset from the state like the other public institutions do. Ours is at about a 10% offset. So in the time period that I've already been the president of the college, the additional expense to the institution that we can only raise through tuition off our students has been over $952,000. And that's an enduring expense that we right now we're prepared to accept and continue to handle. The challenge we have is this summer now, it's going to double. With the increase that will occur this summer, there will be an additional $953,000 or so additional expense to us that we already have in addition to the $950,000, giving us about a $1.6 million bogey that's not reimbursed. We are going to receive some reimbursement, otherwise it'd be about a $1.85 delta, but it'll be about a 1.6 right now. We're not asking for the back years. We're just saying with the projected upcoming expense that's going to occur this summer, we'd just like to get the offset that will enable us to pay back to TRS. That delta right now is about $725,000. And again, we're not looking for the other $950,000 since I've been here that we've already incurred. We're just anticipating what's going to occur this summer and recognizing the enormous implication it'll have on our very limited budget. If you look, you'll see that in our budget, 48% of that goes to the 6th through 12th grade that we have that's associated with our main campus in Milledgeville, a very high-performing, prestigious, college-ready bound kind of school that has a great diversity within it, a wonderful diversity, where we train and educate young men and women to prepare them for college. The other 52% goes to the college. That gives us about $3.5 million to operate an entire institution of about just over 14,300 unduplicated headcount students in the college. And so we're just looking still, Mr. Chairman, for some relief or assistance there with the TRS portion, the unfunded mandate that was going to really help our faculty and staff that work real diligently every day to help these men and women across Georgia.
Thank you, General. Any questions, members of the committee? Let me ask a question or two, General Caldwell. Would it be a fair statement to suggest that the choice to participate for your, again, state institution members who are in the TRS defined benefit, was that a choice that you were given, or is that, I mean, were you allowed to go out and find a defined contribution plan for your teachers and those types of things, or is that somewhat imposed upon? That's.
Mr. Chairman, we've gone back and asked the question if we could have the option to withdraw out of TRS if, in fact, we're going to be given this unfunded mandate to have to operate. Because what will occur with time, we literally will be, I'm not quite sure how, if this kind of continual growth occurs in TRS without some sort of offset, how we can continue to provide an affordable and accessible education to the students we do in the state of Georgia. I mean, we pride ourselves on the fact that we're holding tuition fixed over many years across most of our campuses, and the last thing I want to do is have to walk back and ask our students to pay for the retirement program for our fast staff and faculty at those campuses.
Okay. Members of the committee, I think that's fairly self-explanatory. They are a state institution where they're kind of standing out there on their own. We're making up the unfunded liabilities in every other area of our state budget, and we're going to leave out a institution that, unless we fully fund that has the success that they do. So you'll probably see a recommendation, at least from me, at the will of this committee to make up that differential. That's just, I don't find it acceptable that these are state employees that you pay.
They are, yes, sir.
And I don't see a distinction between the teachers who teach for you and the teachers who teach in our other institutions whose retirement that we're shoring up. Now, whether or not we ever get around to fixing the structural problems that are unsustainable, period, in our entire pension systems with our unfunded liabilities, that's a different committee's job, and this whole General Assembly better get a handle on that soon, or we're going to have a lot worse problems than just one institution and everything else. I mean, the Regents was allowed to go to a defined contribution plan in years past, and that seems to have worked out well. But members of the committee, any further questions for General Caldwell? Any comments about that? General, thank you for taking the time with us today, and we look forward to continuing this conversation.
Well, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. All right, our last presentation, and then we can open it up a little bit from members here on the committee to talk about anything you want. I'll give you some idea of some of the requests that I've had after these presentations, and then we can talk about any of those or anything you may have. I continue to, just FYI, I continue to get the letters and the cards on the capital outlay. budget, so continue to send those to me. The chairman and I sit down regularly and talk about those, so make sure you talk to him. All right, the next is, as you all know, we have the general regents budget, which is purely a lump sum appropriation to the regents based on the constitutional nature of what we have. But over the years, there's grown a specific budget, euphemistically called the B budget, where we directly appropriate the programs to university system units. And I asked Mr. Toby Carr at the University of Georgia, because most of those are housed there, to set up some of these individuals in the B unit. We fund them every year. They're important programs for Georgia. I wanted you to hear from the deans of those departments to talk about what it is we're putting the money towards. So, Mr. Carr, if you'll come up and introduce your presentation or your presenters. The Regents did tell me they didn't want you to come up here.
Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you for very much, and the members of the committee for giving UGA the opportunity to present the B unit requests for fiscal year 2019. Just looking out over this group, I see a lot of red in the crowd, and I know that has nothing to do with the day that it is. It has to do with the strong support for this UGA presentation that we're about to give. Just a strong support and team spirit in the university community, Mr. Chairman. Today you'll hear from representatives from each of those units in the order that they appear in the House budget tracking document. We have Laura Perry Johnson, our Associate Dean for Extension from the College of Agricultural and Environmental Sciences. We have Dean Dale Green from the Warnell School of Forest Resources. I'll present on behalf of the Skidaway Institute of Oceanography. Dean Lisa Nolan will present from College of Veterinary Medicine, along with two other associates she's brought with her. And at this time, we'll now invite Dr. Laura Perry Johnson to present the Ag B budget requests.
Thank you so much, Chairman and members. I certainly appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today on behalf of the College of Agricultural and Environmental Sciences and Dean Sam Pardue, as well as Alan Moore, who's our Associate Dean for Research. At a land-grant institution, I'm sure you understand that research and extension are so integrally intertwined that it's very easy for me to speak to both of those requests today. You'll find those in your tracking document at 41.1 and 41.3. I'll start out with the 5 faculty positions that we are requesting. These are basically faculty positions that are going to support the $74 billion agricultural industry that we have in Georgia. Many of them will support more than one commodity, so that is really important that we can spread our resources across. Those 5 positions, just to give you an idea of what they are, the top position on the list is a pasture weeds and forage agronomist. We have one forage specialist across the state, but with the size of our cattle and forage industry, that's just not enough, and the growth of invasive weeds, so that will support that. The next position is a fully 100% research position that will support a position in peanut genomics that will help us to continue to enhance that industry. The next one is a soil nutritionist, and this is somebody that would help us across the board. We really do not have the depth and power in soil science and soil nutrition that we need to maximize the genetic potential and the improved varieties, and this should allow us to enhance many commodities. The next one is a post-harvest physiologist. Several years back, we were able to make tremendous advances in the onion research because we learned how to store the onions for longer periods of time, and that really enhanced the Vidalia onion industry. This is the type of position that would work with our fruit and vegetable industries from the time of harvest through processing and storage, and help enhance that industry. And finally, a turf grass pathologist that would be located in Griffin that will support the growing turf grass industry and some of our green industry. So So those positions are pretty much a combination of research and extension, and those percentages are indicated in the budget information we've shared with you. On the extension side of things, for what we call county operations, which is cooperative extension out there in the counties across the state, we have been very, very appreciative and very thankful for the support over the last few years that have allowed us to add some extension agent positions. What we are requesting this year is 12 extension educator positions. These are bachelor level positions that could go anywhere in the state, and they could be in program areas of ag, family, consumer sciences, or 4-H. So they would allow us to extend that research-based information throughout the state in a variety of areas and really increase the capacity of the personnel that we currently have there. I do want to note that we are very appreciative for the funding for white file research that showed up in the budget. This is a direct response to the industry who really wishes we could solve this problem and solve it very quickly. We've gotten a lot of support from our commodity organizations, both in-state and nationally, that gave us some seed money to get started from that. Our federal funds, while they're only about 10% of our budget, they allow us to have some capacity to turn some of our researchers and extension specialists and redirect their efforts immediately. And we've done this, so we're working very hard to solve this problem, but it is not a small problem. The warm winters have really exacerbated the problem and the growth in the vegetable industry, which gives these pests what you call a green bridge to go from season to season. Really has been problematic. We're very thankful for the cold weather and hope that continues to help us on that side of things. So I'll stop there. Might be a little more information that you want to know about some of these agricultural issues, but I'd be delighted to answer any questions.
Dean, that's exactly what I wanted you to do, and I'm very appreciative. That's the kind of detail I want to see this committee have. So, members of the committee, I see my colleague in higher ed, Chairman Jaspers, has joined us, and he has a question, so I'm going to go to him.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry I was late. We're making sure we had good roads to all these higher ed facilities across the state of Georgia in the DOT elections.
It's good to hear.
But ma'am, yes, ma'am, I've got just a question on the 12 extension agent positions. You know, of course, I'm one of you and in the past, and how are we maximizing, the state dollars and county dollars and other shared positions? What's the level that counties put in to one of these positions now to get these dollars as far as they can go?
Well, thank you so much for asking that question. We do our dead level best to leverage every state and federal dollar we can with as many county dollars as we can. There are some states across the nation that have gone to kind of a formula type fund. If we did that in Georgia, that wouldn't be very helpful to us, because we've got counties that can afford to put in more resources, and they're willing to, because maybe they want 2 ag agents or they might want 2 4-H agents. And so right now in extension, our budget is about 28% county funded. It's a little over 1/3 state funding and about 10% federal funds. So that ability to leverage all different sources of funds, in addition to grant and generated funds like we could make at some of our 4-H facilities and things like that, allow us to really diversify our sources of funding and be able to really have way more capacity than we would have without that.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, and I know there's questions I get from time to time about the process in which we place priority on those 12 positions. So can you kind of just give us a little insight into how you go about doing that now?
That, I tell people that there's a little bit of an art to that and a little bit of a science, because you have to weigh your resources with the need of the communities, also with their ability to put in resources. So there are times when, for the greater good, we need to fund a higher percentage of a position with, say, state or federal funds, because that community's not able to do that. There are other times, a lot of our metro communities, they put in much larger dollar amounts because they have much larger budgets. But if you look at contribution per citizen, you know, obviously our small counties are way up at the top of that list. One of the counties that lost service over the bad recession times was Tolliver County, a really small county with not a lot of resources. We just got a Center for Disease Control grant last year in conjunction with Public Health at the University of Georgia and Family and Consumer Science. That allowed us to add 2 positions, one in Calhoun County and one in Tolliver County. So that's the type of thing we're trying to do to leverage, you know, the resources we have to put service where it needs to go.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Let's see. Don't see any other questions, Dean. I'm very appreciative of what you've brought to us. And,
Well, I just can't thank you enough. We work every day to be a great value for the resources entrusted to us, and we appreciate your time and this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you. The agricultural education in this state is top of the line in this country, and we should be proud of that. So.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you all today about our budget request. The Warnell School of Forestry and Natural Resources is asking for some additional funds to handle facilities that we're trying to be good stewards of. We have several buildings on our forested properties around the state, some at Whitehall Forest in Athens, which is our principal teaching facility, as well as some applied research, as well as our B.F. Grant Memorial Forest, which is in Putnam and Morgan counties. We're asking for some funding for additional building maintenance, primarily roofs and painting to keep those buildings functional. In addition, our Whitehall headquarters building, which dates to 1893 and is on the National Register of Historic Places, needs some brick ceiling to keep it secure. We've obtained some donated boats from sister federal agencies, Fish and Wildlife Service particularly, which has helped us add research boats to our fleet, our small fleet, which is working on projects as varied as looking at the environmental impacts of the Savannah River harbor deepening, as well as the impacts on mussels and other aquatic life in the Chattahoochee Flint system, which is being contested with our state to the south. We need a place to store those boats to keep them functional, so one of our asks is for some additional funds for a boat storage shed. And then finally, we're going to work to reduce the number of buildings we're maintaining. We have 3 buildings we'd like to demolish so that we can reduce our needs for funds to keep up with those. That's a residence at B.F. Grant that we no longer need since we don't have an employee there, an office at Whitehall that we're going to take down, and a storage building there as well. So small but important ask for us that we'd ask you to consider, and we do deeply appreciate the support of this committee in the past. I think we're leveraging state funds at nearly 2 to 1, and we try to make good use of the taxpayers' dollars. Be happy to field any questions.
Certainly. Members of the committee, any questions? I'm personally very appreciative of everything you're doing. Again, members of the committee, these are direct funds that, unlike the others, we get to take a hand in, and I'm interested in highlighting these because, especially some of these out of these departments, because of the work they've done. You see these in the B budget every year, and we generally don't talk about them. I know Toby does a great job of getting around to most of you and letting you see them, but it's kind of glossed over, and it gets lost in the bigger budget. And it just in that 3 minutes, you find out all of the things that are happening in that we don't always hear about. I'm appreciative, and I know the members of the committee are.
Well, thank you very much. We're appreciative of y'all.
Thanks, sir. Who's next, Toby?
Skidaway Institute, I'll present for them.
Go ahead.
A quick note on the forestry presentation, because there's 2 units under forestry. I believe, and the dean can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the request he made would fall under 41.6 in your tracking document, forestry research, as opposed to the extension spot. I'll present today on behalf of the Skidaway Institute of Oceanography. That's the next one pager you ought to have in your folder. And the request for this year, and Skidaway is going to show up under 41.18 of your tracking document, is a recurring annual request of $114,400 to support 10 days on the research vessel Savannah, which is the most capable platform for conducting oceanographic research and educational activities within the Southeast. Since being brought under the UGA umbrella a few years ago, SKIO has had an enhanced academic mission, and so this funding would support 5 days to be specifically used to support experiential learning opportunities on the research vessel Savannah for both UGA graduate and undergraduate students. The remaining 5 days would be used to support interdisciplinary research with a strong educational and outreach component based on a competitive proposal process that would be open to any other USG institution. So 5 days allocated to UGA, 5 to other USG institutions. In addition to the land grant mission we serve, it's a sea grant as well, and some of that falls under as well. And so that's the thinking behind this request, to expand this unique asset to the state of Georgia to everybody for the experiential learning component.
Thank you, Toby. Any of you who haven't seen that particular boat, it's fascinating for what the undergraduate and graduate students get in experiential learning, and it's another one of those great assets to the state of Georgia. And again, these aren't monster numbers like some of the others we see, but $114,000, it gets 14 students into that kind of an experience is an amazing, inspiring thing. So, Toby, I don't see any questions on that, so thank you for bringing your team.
Thank you.
Anybody? And who else? I think that's it, is it?
Vet Med Experiment Station, and then we'll be done.
Oh, okay, Ag Experiment. Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't say, you guys moved. Just introduce your team when you come up too, please, Dane.
Thank you. We appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today about the B budget request from the University of Georgia's College of Veterinary Medicine. First, we respectfully request the money needed to fully fund 2 food animal veterinarians for Tifton and Athens and 2 staff for the Poultry Diagnostic and Research Center. 75% of these positions were funded last year. To date, the 2 technicians are on board. One of the veterinarians has been hired and will begin in April, and we're negotiating with another to start in June. These are great additions to the college. We're also seeking funds to hire another poultry clinical services veterinarian. We currently have 3, which is just not enough to keep up with the increasing demands for surveillance, disease surveillance in the state, especially for surveillance for highly pathogenic avian influenza. Not only that, but our veterinarians must juggle their surveillance demands with the help they need to give producers, trying to deal with the demands of the Veterinary Feed Directive. Basically, 3 veterinarians we have just cannot keep up with all they must do in service of the poultry industry of Georgia. Also, our B unit spaces, including PDRC, the Athens and Tifton veterinary diagnostic labs, and our 2 farms are in need of sufficient funds for their maintenance and operations. Currently, the support of these units is set at $2.30 per square foot, which is inadequate to the task. We estimate that an increase of $1.97 per square foot in recurring funds is much more realistic. It's also equivalent to the funding provided to the university's College of Agricultural and Environmental Sciences for their B units. We're also seeking to better serve rural Georgia and the livestock producers by construction of a food animal hauling facility in Tifton. Here, we're looking for a one-time expenditure of $900,000 that would be used to construct a referral center for food animals. At this facility, we perform advanced medical procedures that cannot be performed on farm and that local veterinarians would refer to us. In addition to providing the high-level specialty care needed in South Georgia, this facility will allow us to expose more of our students to rural veterinary practice and better enable us to offer continuing education to local veterinarians. We think this would be a win all around. Finally, we're asking for funds for a technician to support applied research in the Tifton Diagnostic Lab. Doing applied research in the diagnostic lab ensures that that research is relevant to the industry, to the Georgia's $3 billion food animal industry. And from my experience, the linkage of diagnostic service to research and teaching is one of the best examples of land-grant philosophy in action that I can think of. So that's what we're here about today, and we appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dean. Let's see, don't see any questions yet, but again, these folks all drove from Athens and from to come show us what they're doing. I mean, the closest Representative Carson and I get to chickens is we don't have a lot of poultry. We have an argument if somebody puts 2 in their backyard in Cobb. But Chairman Jaspers is a little closer to the poultry industry in Georgia, and no, we do understand the economic development potential and the of our agricultural and extension industries in this state.
Thank you.
We're appreciative of what you and your team and the rest of the folks do. So we're looking forward to. I generally get this translated from the chairman. I take Chairman England these particular requests, and he translates all these these terminologies that I'm not necessarily familiar with. In the I certainly don't reach out to Representative Carson for help in this, and he generally says yes, so that's always a good thing.
That's good.
if it has to do with agriculture or extension. So thanks for your time today.
You bet. We
Appreciative.
appreciate your
Thanks everybody
service.
for coming.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Toby. Okay, let me. That's the last of our presenters, members of the committee. I want to give you some idea. We'll probably have one more meeting at least to talk about some of these. I really want to get you these budgets and talk a little bit more in depth about workforce development just among the committee members because of the depth of that. Again, we're going to continue to keep discussing the capital outlay bond projects. We've got several requests for cash. One from Majority Whip Coomer in the section on the Military Guard Service cancelable loan for about $250,000 that we'll be looking at. These are requests, but I want to give you an idea of some of the things that we're looking at. I want to take a look at those E-Corps grants that we heard about. If we can maybe prime that pump a little more with, again, 219,000 students are benefiting from $31 million worth of savings in textbooks, and that's just, I can't imagine the benefit to those individual families on that. $4,000 over the period of 4 years. That's a lot. So let's look at those. I've got another request for that we generally put a small amount into the Georgia Youth Science and Technology Center. That's the group that trains teachers. It's housed at KSU, but it trains the STEM teachers from all over the state. It reaches every single corner to train and incentivize and get teachers who will teach science and math in places in Georgia where it's just not an easy place to get that kind of teacher. So that we get a lot of bang for their buck. We've funded it over the last 4 or 5 years at that amount, so that's another request. I want us to look very carefully at General Caldwell's request. I just don't find it acceptable that a state institution's teachers are not treated the same with respect to retirement. They're paid by the state. We're picking up everybody else's unfunded pension liability. I wouldn't want to sit a teacher from the TRS funded group here and another from GMC paid by the same state and say, why aren't you? I think that's the way we ought to look at that. Unless somebody can convince me differently, that's not a just balance of our funding. So take a look at that. there's about $3 million in the requests from those B budgets that you just heard from. And I'll be taking those again to Chairman England. So he has a particular interest in those requests each year. So we have a request from the private colleges to take a serious look at the tuition equalization grant. I think we took $50 last year. They'd like us to take a serious look at the replacing that $50, Dr. Baxter, if I've characterized that correctly. We've got the library request and the capital budgets. I'm going to ask you to probably put School of Public and International Affairs as a yes in just some language to allow the regions to put funding into that. Our public administration, education here in this state is important so that we have people who can work in administrative agencies, who can graduate and go on to either Washington or here as elected officials or as administrative officials. We need to be very cognizant that we need to run our agencies well, and I don't want them getting educated here in Georgia and then moving to Boston to work in public administration, or having to rely on somebody who was trained in Boston necessarily to run our public administration. So I'll place that request in front of you. Let's see, what else did I have? Just trying to list those. That's about the request I've had on the cash side of the budget as well. So if you'll all take a look at all those different, if you have other requests, if you've heard anything, you've got all the, you've got your tracking sheets for the 19 budget. We'll get back together and maybe at the next meeting we'll talk in just general terms about the changes the Senate made and the 18 amended. And we'll also begin to work through some of these. But take a look at that workforce development if you would for me, please. I'll make sure I get that to you. Oh, and I did not want to just go right over. Our student finance is here, and they are interim. Miss Kaylee Noggle sat through the entire presentation of everybody else. I hate to always treat you guys like the stepchild, but you do such a great job, and I don't need a lot of it from. Okay. Do remember that the Student Finance Agency is under our purview as well, and she's doing a great job in her role. So let's. I think you probably heard the original budget presentation. There's just not a lot of work that's happening in that from our perspective this year. There's always a lot of work in that agency. So, but they always do it so well. And if you don't hear about it, sometimes it's a good thing. All right. Any questions of me I got you out of here 30 minutes earlier than the 2 hours we scheduled for the meeting. So I will let you know as soon as I've found out from Chairman England what the next round of these hearings will be. And then the next one we'll probably have some in-depth discussion, but we'll probably be asked to push out the 19 budget during that one as well. So come ready for that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for taking the time this afternoon. I think you saw some really interesting things, particularly the textbook. Tell everybody about that. That's a pretty neat thing. So thanks for coming and have a good afternoon. Meeting adjourned.